The morning sun cast long shadows across Naval Amphibious Base Coronado as the clock struck 5:30 a.m. The air hung heavy with the scent of gunpowder and ocean salt, a combination that had become as familiar as breathing to the 47 Navy SEALs gathered at the main firing range. The rhythmic crack of rifle fire echoed across the complex, punctuated by the sharp commands of range safety officers monitoring the morning qualification drills. Among the sea of tactical gear and camouflage uniforms, something unusual caught the attention of Lieutenant Commander Blake Morrison. A woman in her mid-40s walked slowly through the main gate, wearing nothing more than a simple gray t-shirt and dark pants. Her light brown hair was pulled back in a neat bun, a few loose curls framing a face that seemed almost serene despite the chaos of military training surrounding her. Morrison paused his inspection of the firing line, his weathered face creasing into a frown. In his 10 years as a SEAL officer, he had developed an almost instinctive radar for things that did not belong. And this woman, walking calmly through a restricted military facility as if she owned the place, definitely did not belong. The sound of boots on concrete grew louder as Morrison approached, his presence commanding immediate attention from the nearby trainees. The woman continued her steady pace toward the range office, seemingly oblivious to the growing number of eyes tracking her movement. Her stride held an odd quality that Morrison could not quite place. Too measured, too aware, too controlled for a civilian who had wandered into unfamiliar territory. "Ma'am," Morrison called out, his voice carrying the authority of years in special operations. "This is a military facility, not a civilian shooting range." The woman stopped, turning slowly to face him. Her green eyes swept the area in a 360-degree pattern before settling on Morrison's face. The movement was so subtle, so automatic, that most would have missed it entirely. But Chief Master Sergeant Rodriguez, standing near the weapons maintenance station, caught the tactical awareness in that simple turn. His eyebrows raised slightly as he watched the interaction unfold. "I believe there may be some confusion," Morrison continued, his tone growing more condescending with each word. "The civilian shooting classes are held downtown. This is Naval Special Warfare Training Facility." A ripple of quiet laughter spread through the group of SEALs who had begun to gather, drawn by the unusual sight of their lieutenant commander addressing what appeared to be a lost soccer mom. The woman remained silent, her breathing pattern steady and controlled, despite the mounting attention. Morrison noted her stance had shifted almost imperceptibly, feet positioned for better balance, weight distributed as if ready to move in any direction. "Perhaps you could direct me to the appropriate office," the woman replied, her voice calm and professional. "I have documentation regarding my presence here." Morrison's smile widened, the kind of expression that had intimidated countless recruits over the years. "Documentation? What kind of documentation could you possibly have for access to a SEAL training facility?" As he gestured toward the exit gate, something remarkable happened. The woman's eyes automatically checked the corners of the compound, scanning for potential threats or escape routes. Her hand briefly touched the area near her left hip, where a sidearm would typically rest. These movements were so ingrained, so automatic, that they spoke of years of tactical training burned into muscle memory. Chief Rodriguez felt a strange recognition stirring in his chest. He had seen those movements before, performed by operators who had spent decades in the field, but this woman looked like she belonged in a corporate boardroom, not a combat zone. Morrison, meanwhile, had decided to escalate his demonstration of authority. "Let me guess," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're here for the spouse activity program, maybe looking to sign up for the wives' self-defense class?" The gathering crowd of SEALs chuckled appreciatively at their commander's wit. This was the kind of entertainment that broke up the monotony of routine training exercises. Morrison was known for his sharp tongue and his ability to put civilians in their place when they wandered where they did not belong. But the woman showed no reaction to the mockery. Her face remained impassive, professional, as if she were accustomed to dealing with hostile situations. Under the edge of her left sleeve, Rodriguez caught a glimpse of what appeared to be a tattoo, numbers that looked suspiciously like military grid coordinates. Morrison decided to test her composure further. Without warning, he grabbed a clipboard from a nearby table and tossed it in her direction, expecting to see the typical civilian reaction of surprise and fumbling. Instead, the woman caught the clipboard one-handed with fluid precision, her body barely shifting to accommodate the unexpected projectile. Her eyes calculated the trajectory in real time, and she smoothly returned the clipboard to Morrison with a gentle underhand motion that spoke of countless hours of hand-eye coordination training. The laughter died in the throats of the observing SEALs. Petty Officer Williams leaned toward his training partner and whispered, "Did you see that catch? That was not normal." Morrison felt his confidence waver for just a moment, but his ego quickly reasserted itself. "Interesting reflexes for a secretary," he said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "Tell me, ma'am, what exactly is your rank? Chief of the bake sale division?" The woman's hand unconsciously moved toward her pants pocket, where the outline of something circular pressed against the fabric. The gesture was brief, automatic, but Rodriguez caught it. He had seen enough challenge coins in his 20-year career to recognize the distinctive shape. "Let's see if you can handle something more challenging than paperwork," Morrison continued, his voice now carrying the attention of every person within 50 yards. The sound of rifle fire began to fade as more SEALs became aware of the confrontation unfolding near the range office. The woman remained silent, but something had changed in her demeanor. The casual civilian posture was gradually being replaced by something else, a bearing that spoke of command experience and hard-earned authority. Her breathing remained controlled, but there was a new intensity in her eyes that made Rodriguez increasingly uncomfortable with the direction this encounter was taking. "I'm waiting for an answer," Morrison pressed, moving closer to establish physical dominance. "What gives you the right to walk into my training facility like you own the place?" The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sound of waves crashing against the Coronado shoreline. 47 sets of eyes watched as two very different kinds of authority faced off in the morning sun. Rodriguez found himself reaching for his radio, though he could not quite articulate why. Something about this woman triggered every instinct he had developed in 2 decades of military service. The way she stood, the way she observed, the way she had caught that clipboard, none of it fit with the image of a confused civilian who had wandered into the wrong place. Morrison, however, was just getting started. He had an audience now, and he intended to make the most of it. "You know what? Since you're so interested in our little operation here, why don't you stick around? Maybe you can learn something about what real military training looks like." The woman nodded slowly, as if considering a tactical proposal rather than submitting to harassment. "That would be acceptable," she replied, her tone neutral and professional. The response caught Morrison off guard. He had expected protests, demands to speak to someone in charge, or the typical civilian outrage at being treated with anything less than perfect courtesy. Instead, this woman was agreeing to submit to whatever tests he had in mind. "Acceptable," Morrison repeated, his voice rising slightly. "Lady, this is not a request. This is me telling you how things are going to work in my house." As the morning progressed, Morrison found himself escalating the situation beyond what anyone present had expected. What had started as a simple case of misdirection had become a public display of authority that was drawing attention from across the base. Range safety officers began to gather at a respectful distance, unsure whether to intervene or simply observe. The woman accepted each challenge with the same calm professionalism that had marked her initial response. When Morrison suggested she observe the weapons maintenance procedures, she demonstrated a familiarity with military firearms that went far beyond civilian experience. When he asked her to identify various pieces of equipment, she used terminology that indicated advanced tactical knowledge. Chief Rodriguez found himself making a discreet phone call to the base operations center. "This is Rodriguez at Range Complex Alpha. I need a quick verification on something. Can you check if we have any scheduled civilian visitors today?" The response was immediate and negative. No civilian visits were scheduled, and no outside contractors were expected until the following week. Rodriguez felt his unease growing as he watched the woman demonstrate what appeared to be instinctive knowledge of military protocols. Morrison, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly frustrated with his inability to rattle his target. Every test he devised, every challenge he presented, was met with competent execution and professional composure. The gathering crowd of SEALs had gone from amused observation to uncomfortable silence as they watched their commander push harder and harder against someone who showed no signs of breaking. "You know what I think?" Morrison announced loud enough for everyone to hear. "I think we have ourselves a wannabe, someone who watched a few movies and thinks she knows how the military works." The accusation hung in the air like morning fog, thick with implication and challenge. Several of the younger SEALs shifted uncomfortably, recognizing that their commander had crossed a line from professional inquiry into personal attack. Rodriguez found himself hoping that whoever this woman was, she would simply leave before things escalated further. But the woman made no move to retreat. Instead, she stood a little straighter, her posture shifting into something that Rodriguez suddenly recognized with crystal clarity. It was the bearing of someone who had commanded troops in combat, who had made life-and-death decisions under pressure, who had earned their authority through fire rather than simply through promotion. "Chief Rodriguez," the woman said quietly, her voice carrying despite its low volume, "could you tell me the current range safety protocols for this facility?" Rodriguez found himself responding automatically, his military training overriding his confusion. "Ma'am, we maintain hot and cold range status based on active firing positions. All personnel must maintain appropriate eye and ear protection when the range is hot, and all weapons must be cleared and inspected before movement to forward positions." "And the protocol for visiting personnel?" she continued. "All visitors must be escorted by qualified range safety personnel and briefed on emergency procedures before observation of live fire exeresis," Rodriguez replied, then stopped as he realized what he had just said. He had addressed her as ma'am, with the automatic respect of a subordinate speaking to a superior officer. Morrison caught the exchange and his face reddened with anger. "Chief, this woman is not military personnel. She does not rate military courtesy." "Of course not," the woman agreed quietly. "Military courtesy must be earned through service and sacrifice. It cannot be demanded or assumed." The statement carried in weight that silenced the entire group. There was something in the way she spoke those words that suggested personal experience with both service and sacrifice. Rodriguez felt a chill run down his spine as pieces of a puzzle he did not understand began to fall into place. The morning sun climbed higher, casting shorter shadows across the range complex as the confrontation continued to build. Morrison had painted himself into a corner with his public challenges, and his reputation demanded that he see this through to whatever conclusion awaited. The woman remained calm and composed, but there was an energy building around her that spoke of reserves of strength and authority that had not yet been revealed. Rodriguez made another discreet radio call, this time to the officer of the deck. "Sir, we have a situation developing at the range that might require command attention. There's a civilian present who's demonstrating unusual familiarity with our procedures." The response was immediate and concerning. "Rodriguez, what kind of familiarity are we talking about?" "Sir, the kind that usually comes with years of experience in special operations." The radio was quiet for a long moment before the OOD responded. "I'm sending Lieutenant Mills to assess the situation. Keep things calm until he arrives." Rodriguez looked at the growing crowd of SEALs surrounding Morrison and his mysterious challenger. Keeping things calm might be easier said than done. Morrison was clearly committed to proving his point, whatever that point might be, and the woman showed no signs of backing down from whatever tests he had in mind. As if summoned by the rising tension, Petty Officer First Class Williams approached Rodriguez with a troubled expression. "Chief, I've been watching this whole thing, and something is not right about this situation." "What do you mean, Williams?" "The way she moves, Chief, the way she thinks. I've seen a lot of operators come through this facility, and she's got all the signs. But Morrison is treating her like some random civilian who wandered in off the street." Rodriguez nodded grimly. "I'm beginning to think we may be witnessing a very serious mistake in progress." The sound of approaching footsteps announced the arrival of Lieutenant Mills, the officer of the deck, whose presence immediately elevated the seriousness of the situation. Mills was known throughout the base as a careful, thoughtful officer who did not make hasty decisions or tolerate unnecessary drama. "What's the situation here?" Mills asked Rodriguez quietly, his eyes taking in the crowd and the two central figures who remained locked in their verbal standoff. "Sir, Lieutenant Commander Morrison discovered this woman on the range and has been testing her knowledge of military procedures. She's shown unusual familiarity with our protocols." Mills studied the woman carefully, noting the same tactical awareness that had caught Rodriguez's attention. "Has she presented any identification or stated her business here?" "She mentioned having documentation, but Morrison has not allowed her to present it," Rodriguez replied. Mills frowned. In his experience, refusing to examine someone's credentials was rarely a wise course of action, especially when that person was demonstrating knowledge they should not possess. "I think it's time we resolve this situation properly." But before Mills could intervene, Morrison escalated to a new level. "You know what? I'm tired of playing games. If you really know so much about military operations, let's see you prove it. He gestured toward the weapons maintenance bay, where several M4 carbines were laid out for routine inspection. Let's see if you can field strip one of these weapons. But I'm warning you, if you damage military equipment, you'll be facing federal charges. The woman looked at the weapons for a moment, then walked calmly to the nearest table. What happened next sent a shockwave through every observer present. She approached the M4 with the confidence of someone who had performed this task thousands of times. Her hands moved with mechanical precision, breaking down the weapon into its component parts with a speed and efficiency that matched or exceeded that of the instructors present. She performed the disassembly without hesitation, without consultation, and without a single wasted motion. The crowd fell into absolute silence as she completed the task and began reassembly. Every movement spoke of muscle memory earned through countless hours of training and field use. She handled each component with the casual familiarity of someone for whom these weapons were tools of daily professional use, rather than objects of curiosity. "Holy cow," Williams whispered to his partner. "I've never seen anyone move that fast." Rodriguez found himself checking his watch. The woman had completed the entire field stripping and reassembly process in under 2 minutes. A time that would have been impressive for a seasoned armorer, let alone someone Morrison had dismissed as a civilian interloper. Morrison stared at the reassembled weapon, his confidence beginning to crack for the first time since the confrontation began. "Where did you learn to do that?" he demanded. "Practice," the woman replied simply. "What kind of practice? Where? When?" The woman remained silent, but her posture had shifted again. The casual civilian bearing was almost completely gone now, replaced by something that made every military person present unconsciously straighten their own posture. She radiated the kind of quiet authority that came only from years of successful command in high-pressure situations. Lieutenant Mills decided it was time to intervene. "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Mills, officer of the deck for this facility. Could you please present your identification and state your business here?" The woman turned to face Mills, and he found himself looking into eyes that held depths of experience he had not expected. "Certainly, Lieutenant. I have documentation in my vehicle. However, I should mention that Lieutenant Commander Morrison has requested I demonstrate various capabilities before examining my credentials." Mills shot a sharp look at Morrison. "Is that correct, Commander?" Morrison's jaw tightened. He had gone too far to back down now, especially with a growing audience of his own subordinates watching every move. "I was establishing whether this person poses a security risk to our facility. By having her handle classified military equipment," Mills asked, his tone carrying a warning. The question hung in the air as everyone present realized the implications. If the woman was truly a civilian with no military background, allowing her to handle weapons and observe training procedures was a serious breach of security protocols. If she was something else, if she had legitimate reasons for her knowledge and presence, then Morrison had been publicly humiliating someone who might outrank him significantly. Rodriguez felt his radio buzz with an incoming message. The text was brief but alarming. "Command requests immediate status report on civilian present at Range Alpha. Confirm identity and security clearance immediately." The message suggested that someone at a much higher level had become aware of the situation. Rodriguez looked at the woman with new eyes, wondering what kind of person attracted the attention of base command simply by walking onto a training range. As if sensing the shift in atmosphere, the woman reached into her pocket and withdrew something that made Rodriguez's heart skip a beat. It was a challenge coin, but not just any challenge coin. Even from a distance, he could see the distinctive matte black finish and the subtle golden trident that marked it as something special. Morrison noticed the coin as well, and for the first time since the confrontation began, he looked genuinely uncertain. Challenge coins were serious business in the military community, and the design of this particular coin was sending warning signals through his consciousness. "Ma'am," Mills said carefully, "could you show me that coin?" The woman handed it over without hesitation. Mills examined it closely, his face growing pale as he recognized the markings. The coin was real. The weight, the finish, the precise engraving all spoke of authentic military issue. But more importantly, the symbols on the coin identified it as belonging to a very specific and very elite community within the Navy SEALs. "Commander Morrison," Mills said quietly, "I think you need to see this." Morrison took the coin with hands that were beginning to tremble slightly. The reality of what he was holding began to sink in as he examined the details. The serial number, the unit designation, the classification markings. Everything about the coin spoke of legitimacy at the highest levels of special operations. "Sir," Rodriguez interrupted, approaching with his radio in hand, "I'm receiving urgent requests from command for information about our visitor. They're asking for immediate confirmation of identity and security clearance status." The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to come together in ways that none of them had anticipated. Morrison found himself holding a challenge coin that represented years of service in one of the most elite units in the U.S. military, issued to someone he had been treating as an unwelcome intruder. The woman watched the realization dawn on their faces with the same calm composure she had maintained throughout the entire encounter. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "it would be appropriate to continue this discussion in a more private setting." Mills nodded immediately. "Absolutely. Ma'am, if you would accompany me to the command office, we can resolve this situation properly." But Morrison was not ready to concede defeat. His reputation and authority had been publicly challenged, and admitting error now would undermine his position with every SEAL under his command. "Not so fast," he said, his voice taking on a desperate edge. "Anyone can carry a coin. That doesn't prove anything about who she really is." The statement was technically true, but practically absurd. Challenge coins, especially those from elite units, were not casual possessions. They were earned through service, sacrifice, and proven capability. The suggestion that someone would carry such a coin without having earned it was tantamount to accusing them of stolen valor, a serious charge that required serious evidence. "Commander," Mills said carefully, "I think we should proceed with proper identification verification through official channels." But the woman raised her hand slightly, a gesture that somehow commanded immediate attention from everyone present. "It's all right, Lieutenant. The commander has questions about my qualifications. Perhaps it would be appropriate to address those questions directly." Her voice had changed again, taking on tones of authority that made even Mills unconsciously adopt a more respectful posture. Rodriguez found himself wondering what rank this woman had held during her military service, and why she was present at their facility without proper introduction through command channels. Morrison, meanwhile, was trapped by his own rhetoric. He had publicly challenged this woman's credentials and demanded proof of her capabilities. Now, faced with evidence that suggested he had made a serious error in judgment, he found himself unable to retreat without losing face in front of his subordinates. "Fine," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "You want to prove yourself? Then prove yourself. Show me something that requires real military training, not just familiarity with equipment." The challenge was issued with the finality of a man who had burned his bridges and was committed to seeing the confrontation through to its conclusion. The woman considered his words for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well," she replied. "What did you have in mind?" Morrison looked around the range complex, his eyes settling on the close-quarters combat training facility that occupied the far end of the complex. The CQC house was designed to simulate urban combat environments, complete with multiple rooms, variable lighting, and sophisticated target systems. It was used primarily for advanced SEAL training and was considered one of the most challenging facilities of its type in the military. "The CQC course," Morrison announced. "Let's see how you handle room-clearing procedures." A collective intake of breath went up from the assembled SEALs. The CQC course was not a casual training exercise. It required years of experience, perfect timing, and intimate knowledge of urban combat tactics. Mistakes in the course could result in serious injury or worse. Lieutenant Mills stepped forward immediately. "Commander, I cannot authorize civilian access to the CQC facility. The liability issues alone—" "She's not a civilian," Morrison interrupted. "Are you, ma'am? You're here to prove you belong in our world, so prove it." The woman looked at the CQC facility, then back at Morrison. When she spoke, her voice carried undertones that made Rodriguez's skin crawl with recognition. "I accept your challenge, Commander. However, I suggest we establish clear parameters for safety and evaluation." The professional competence in her voice was unmistakable now. She was not asking for help or guidance. She was establishing the rules of engagement for a tactical exercise. Rodriguez had heard that tone before, from officers who had commanded troops in combat, and who knew exactly what they were doing in high-pressure situations. Mills found himself in an impossible position. Every protocol dictated that he should halt this entire proceeding and refer the matter to higher command. But the woman's confident acceptance of Morrison's challenge suggested that she might indeed have the credentials to justify her presence and actions. "Ma'am," Mills said carefully, "before we proceed any further, I must insist on proper identification and verification of your status." The woman nodded. "Of course, but perhaps it would be more efficient to complete the commander's evaluation first. I believe the results will answer many of your questions." Morrison felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon him. He had escalated this confrontation to a point where retreat was impossible without complete loss of credibility. Every SEAL on the base would know that he had backed down from a challenge he himself had issued. "Agreed," he said, his voice carrying more confidence than he felt. "Standard CQC protocols. You'll be observed and evaluated by qualified personnel. Any safety violations will result in immediate termination of the exercise." The woman smiled for the first time since the confrontation began. It was not a friendly smile, but rather the expression of someone who had accepted a challenge they were confident of winning. "That seems reasonable, Commander. Shall we proceed?" As the group moved toward the CQC facility, Rodriguez found himself walking beside Mills. "Sir," he said quietly, "I have a very bad feeling about this." Mills nodded grimly. "So do I, Chief. But at this point, I think we need to see where this leads. If Morrison is wrong about this woman, we're about to witness a very serious mistake. If he's right—" Mills paused, considering the implications. "Well, if he's right, then we have a security breach that needs immediate investigation." The CQC facility loomed ahead of them, its dark windows and multiple entrances presenting a maze of tactical challenges that had tested thousands of SEALs over the years. As they approached the control booth, Rodriguez couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to witness something that would change everything they thought they knew about the quiet woman in the gray t-shirt. Morrison began explaining the course layout and objectives, his voice taking on the professional tones of an instructor briefing a student. But the woman listened with the attention of someone reviewing familiar material rather than learning something new. Her questions were precise, technical, and demonstrated a depth of understanding that made Rodriguez increasingly nervous about the outcome of this exercise. "The scenario is straightforward," Morrison concluded. "Multiple rooms, unknown number of targets, civilians present. Standard rules of engagement apply. Time limit is 8 minutes for completion." The woman nodded. 8 minutes is generous for a facility this size. "May I inspect the equipment?" Morrison gestured toward the gear rack where protective equipment and simulation weapons were stored. The woman moved among the items with the casual efficiency of someone who had used similar equipment countless times. She selected body armor, eye protection, and a simulation rifle with movements that spoke of long familiarity with tactical gear. As she prepared for the exercise, Rodriguez noticed details that had escaped his attention before. The way she adjusted the body armor showed intimate knowledge of proper fit and function. Her grip on the simulation weapon was perfect. Not the awkward fumbling of someone learning, but the automatic positioning of muscle memory earned through extensive training. "Ready when you are," she announced, taking position at the facility entrance. Morrison moved to the control booth, where he could observe and evaluate her performance. Mills joined him, along with Rodriguez and several other senior personnel who had gathered to witness what was rapidly becoming the most unusual training exercise any of them had ever observed. "Begin when ready," Morrison announced over the facility's intercom system. What happened next would be talked about in SEAL training circles for years to come. The woman entered the facility with a smoothness and precision that immediately distinguished her from even experienced operators. Her movement through the first room was flawless, pieing corners, checking angles, maintaining proper spacing from walls and obstacles. She identified and engaged targets with mechanical efficiency while avoiding harm to civilian mannequins placed throughout the course. "Holy cow," Williams whispered from his position in the observation booth. "Look at her move." Rodriguez watched in growing amazement as the woman flowed through the course like water finding its natural path. Every movement was economical, purposeful, and devastatingly effective. She cleared rooms with a speed and efficiency that matched the best performances he had ever witnessed. But what impressed him most was the tactical intelligence behind every decision. She adapted to changing conditions within the facility as if she had run this exact course dozens of times before. When she encountered a complex multi-room scenario in the facility's central section, she employed advanced tactics that were not taught to anyone below the most senior operational levels. Morrison found himself leaning forward in the observation booth, his initial skepticism giving way to professional admiration despite himself. "Where did she learn to move like that?" he muttered. "Sir," Rodriguez said quietly, "I don't think she learned it. I think she lived it." The woman's progress through the course was being tracked electronically, with sensors monitoring her speed, accuracy, and tactical decisions. The numbers appearing on the control booth displays were almost impossible to believe. She was not just completing the course successfully, she was setting new performance standards. Mills found himself checking and rechecking the electronic displays. "Those times can't be right," he said to no one in particular. But the sensors were functioning perfectly, and the woman was indeed moving through the most challenging tactical training facility on the base, with a speed and precision that defied explanation. She completed complex scenarios that typically required team coordination, adapting her tactics to solo operation with seamless efficiency. As she entered the final section of the course, Rodriguez realized he was holding his breath. The last room was designed to be the most challenging, with multiple levels, concealed positions, and a scenario that required split-second decision-making under maximum pressure. The woman paused at the threshold for perhaps 3 seconds, reading the tactical situation with eyes that missed nothing. Then she moved into action with a precision that left every observer speechless. She identified and neutralized multiple threats while protecting civilian targets in a complex environment that had challenged the best operators on the base. Her movement was a masterclass in close-quarters combat, demonstrating techniques and tactical awareness that spoke of years of operational experience at the highest levels. When the final buzzer sounded, indicating course completion, the observation booth was filled with stunned silence. The electronic displays showed a completion time that shattered the existing facility record by more than 30 seconds. Her accuracy scores were perfect. Her tactical decisions had been flawless throughout. Morrison stared at the displays as if they were showing him something from another planet. "That's impossible," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But the evidence was undeniable. Every sensor, every camera, every measurement system in the facility confirmed what they had all witnessed. The quiet woman in the gray t-shirt had just delivered a performance that ranked among the finest demonstrations of close-quarters combat expertise any of them had ever seen. Rodriguez felt his radio buzzing insistently. When he answered, the voice on the other end was tense with urgency. "Chief, I need you to confirm the identity of your visitor immediately. Command is asking questions I cannot answer." Looking at the woman as she emerged from the CQC facility, removing her protective gear with the same casual efficiency she had shown throughout the morning, Rodriguez suddenly understood why Command was asking questions. This was not a case of mistaken identity or curious civilian. This was something much more significant and much more complicated. Morrison climbed down from the observation booth on unsteady legs, his face pale with the realization of what he had just witnessed. He approached the woman with none of the swagger that had marked his earlier behavior. "Ma'am," he said, his voice tight with emotion, "I owe you an apology." The woman looked at him with eyes that held no malice, only the patient expression of someone who had dealt with similar situations before. "No apology necessary, Commander. You were doing your job, protecting your facility and your personnel." Her response only made Morrison feel worse. The grace with which she accepted his grudging acknowledgement spoke of a character that had been tested and proven in ways he was only beginning to understand. Lieutenant Mills approached with the challenge coin still in his hand. "Ma'am, I think it's time we had a proper introduction. Could you please tell us who you are?" The woman looked around at the assembled crowd of SEALs, all of whom were now watching her, with expressions of respect and curiosity rather than skepticism and amusement. When she spoke, her voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to command. "Captain Maria Santos, United States Navy, retired, 20 years of service, 15 in special operations. Call sign Ghost 6. The words hit the assembled group like a physical blow. Rodriguez felt his knees go weak as the implications sank in. Morrison looked as if he might collapse entirely. "DevGru team leader," Santos continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Operation Neptune Spear support element. Multiple classified deployments across 3 theaters of operation. Current status: Strategic Advisor for Advanced Combat Training Development." The silence that followed was absolute. Every person present understood they had just witnessed something unprecedented. the public humiliation and subsequent vindication of a genuine American hero. Morrison had challenged one of the most elite operators in U.S. military history, treating her like an unwelcome intruder in facilities where she had every right to be present. Rodriguez found his voice first. "Ma'am, welcome to Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. We apologize for any inconvenience you may have experienced." Santos smiled, and this time it was warm and genuine. "Thank you, Chief. I've experienced worse inconveniences in my career." The understatement drew nervous laughter from several of the younger SEALs, who were beginning to process the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Morrison, meanwhile, stood frozen in place, the full weight of his error finally settling upon him. Mills stepped forward, his training and protocol finally overriding his shock. "Ma'am, could you accompany me to the command office? I believe Captain Hayes will want to meet with you personally." Santos nodded. "Of course. But first, I should collect my documentation from my vehicle. I suspect there will be questions about my presence here." As the group began to move toward the command building, Rodriguez found himself walking beside Morrison. The lieutenant commander looked like a man who had aged years in the span of a single morning. "Holy cow, Commander," Rodriguez said quietly. "Do you realize what just happened?" Morrison nodded slowly. "I just publicly humiliated a DevGru team leader. My career is over." Rodriguez considered this assessment and found himself unable to argue with it. Word of this incident would spread through the SEAL community like wildfire. Morrison's reputation for good judgment and leadership had been shattered beyond repair. But as they approached the command building, Santos turned back to address Morrison directly. "Commander," she said, her voice carrying a tone of professional respect, "you were protecting your people and your facility. That shows good leadership instincts, even if the execution was flawed." The kindness in her words only made Morrison's humiliation more complete. She was offering him dignity in defeat, treating him with the grace that befitted her rank and experience rather than with the scorn he had earned through his behavior. "Ma'am," Morrison managed, "I don't deserve your consideration." "We all make mistakes," Santos replied. "The measure of a leader is how they learn from those mistakes and grow stronger." As they entered the command building, Rodriguez couldn't help but reflect on the morning's events. In less than 3 hours, they had witnessed a masterclass in both how not to handle an unusual situation and how to maintain dignity under pressure. Morrison's aggressive confrontation had revealed his own insecurities and poor judgment, while Santos's patient professionalism had demonstrated the kind of character that created genuine leaders. The implications of the morning's events were only beginning to unfold, but Rodriguez suspected that this day would be remembered as a turning point for everyone involved. Morrison would have to rebuild his reputation and leadership style from the ground up. Santos would likely become a legendary figure in base folklore, and every SEAL who had witnessed the encounter would carry the lessons learned into their own future leadership roles. As they waited outside Captain Hayes' office, Rodriguez found himself studying Santos with new eyes. The quiet woman in the gray t-shirt had revealed herself to be one of the most accomplished warriors in modern American military history. Her presence at their base was not an accident or a mistake. It was an opportunity for learning and growth that Morrison had nearly destroyed through his own prejudices and assumptions. The door to Captain Hayes' office opened, and the base commanding officer emerged with an expression that suggested he had already been briefed on the morning's events. His salute to Santos was immediate and precise, acknowledging not just her former rank, but the respect she had earned through 2 decades of distinguished service. "Captain Santos," Hayes said, his voice carrying the formal respect due to a visiting dignitary, "welcome to Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. I apologize for any difficulties you may have encountered this morning." Santos returned the salute with the crisp precision of someone for whom military courtesy was second nature. "Thank you, Captain Hayes. Your personnel were simply doing their jobs. I harbor no ill will toward anyone involved in this morning's misunderstanding." Hayes nodded, but his eyes moved to Morrison with an expression that promised a very serious conversation in the near future. "Perhaps we could continue this discussion in my office. I believe we have much to discuss regarding your advisory role here." As Santos and Hayes disappeared into the office, Morrison found himself standing in the hallway with Rodriguez and the other personnel who had witnessed the morning's events. The silence stretched uncomfortably as everyone processed what they had just experienced. "Chief," Morrison said finally, his voice hollow with defeat, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." Rodriguez nodded. "Of course, sir." How badly did I mess this up? Rodriguez considered the question carefully before answering. Sir, with all due respect, this morning's events will be discussed in SEAL training circles for the next 20 years. Captain Santos just delivered one of the finest demonstrations of tactical proficiency anyone present has ever witnessed, after being subjected to public questioning of her qualifications and character. Morrison closed his eyes, the full weight of his error finally settling upon him. And I was the one questioning her qualifications. Yes, sir, you were. The two men stood in silence for several minutes, listening to the muffled conversation coming from Captain Hayes' office. Rodriguez could only imagine the discussion taking place behind that closed door, but he suspected it involved significant changes to the base's training programs and protocols. When the office door finally opened, Santos and Hayes emerged together, their body language suggesting that important decisions had been made. Hayes looked around at the assembled personnel with an expression that commanded immediate attention. Gentlemen, he announced, I want to inform you that Captain Santos has agreed to serve as senior advisor for our advanced combat training programs. She will be developing new curricula for special operations preparation and will be directly involved in the evaluation and training of our most promising personnel. The announcement sent ripples of excitement through the group. Having a DevGru team leader involved in their training programs was an unprecedented opportunity for professional development. Rodriguez felt his own excitement building as he considered the possibilities. Furthermore, Hayes continued, his voice taking on a harder edge, this morning's events have highlighted some deficiencies in our protocols for handling visiting personnel and potential security situations. We will be conducting a comprehensive review of those protocols to ensure that similar misunderstandings do not occur in the future. Morrison understood that the comprehensive review would focus heavily on his own conduct and decision-making. He nodded acknowledgement, knowing that his military career had taken a serious blow from which it might never recover. Santos stepped forward, her presence commanding immediate attention from everyone present. I want to thank all of you for this morning's educational experience. Commander Morrison's challenges allowed me to demonstrate capabilities that might otherwise have remained theoretical. Sometimes the best learning comes from the most unexpected situations. Her words were gracious, but everyone present understood the subtext. Morrison's aggressive confrontation had inadvertently provided Santos with an opportunity to establish her credentials in the most dramatic possible fashion. The CQC course performance would become legendary, but it would always be remembered in the context of Morrison's initial skepticism and hostility. I look forward to working with all of you in the coming weeks, Santos continued. I believe we can accomplish great things together. As the group began to disperse, Rodriguez found himself walking alongside Santos toward the parking area. Ma'am, he said, if you don't mind me asking, what really brought you to our facility this morning? Santos smiled. I was scheduled to meet with Captain Hayes about the advisory position. I arrived early and decided to observe your training procedures before our formal meeting. I had no intention of becoming involved in demonstration activities. And when Commander Morrison challenged you, I saw an opportunity to establish credibility in a way that would be clearly understood by everyone present. Sometimes actions speak louder than credentials. Rodriguez nodded, understanding the tactical thinking behind her decision. By accepting Morrison's challenges and demonstrating her capabilities so dramatically, Santos had established herself as a legitimate authority figure who could not be questioned or dismissed by anyone on the base. Ma'am, I hope you know that not everyone shares Commander Morrison's initial reaction to your presence. Santos stopped walking and turned to face Rodriguez directly. Chief, Commander Morrison is a good officer who made a mistake. I've made plenty of mistakes in my own career. The important thing is that we all learn from this experience and move forward as professionals. The generosity of her response impressed Rodriguez even more than her tactical skills had. Santos could have destroyed Morrison's career with a single complaint to Captain Hayes, but instead she was choosing to treat the incident as a learning opportunity for everyone involved. Will Commander Morrison be involved in your training programs? Rodriguez asked. Santos considered the question carefully. That will depend on his ability to adapt his leadership style and learn from this morning's events. I believe in second chances, Chief, but they must be earned through genuine growth and change. As they reached the parking area, Rodriguez saw Santos's vehicle for the first time. It was a modest sedan that gave no hint of its owner's extraordinary background. The contrast between the unassuming exterior and the legendary operator who drove it seemed somehow appropriate. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said as Santos prepared to leave, "thank you for handling this morning with such professionalism. A lesser person might have made things much more difficult for everyone involved." Santos paused with her hand on the car door. "Chief, I spent 20 years learning that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from lifting them up. This morning was an opportunity to demonstrate that principle in action." As Santos drove away, Rodriguez stood in the parking lot reflecting on the morning's events. In the span of a few hours, he had witnessed a masterclass in both leadership and character. Morrison's confrontational approach had revealed the limitations of leadership based on intimidation and assumption. Santos's patient professionalism had demonstrated the power of leadership based on competence, integrity, and genuine respect for others. The ripple effects of this morning would be felt throughout the base for months to come. Training protocols would be revised, leadership styles would be examined, and every SEAL who had witnessed the encounter would carry new understanding of what it meant to be a true professional warrior. Rodriguez made his way back to the range complex, where normal training activities were slowly resuming, but the atmosphere had changed fundamentally. Word of Santos's performance was already spreading through the base, and every conversation seemed to circle back to the incredible demonstration they had witnessed. Williams approached Rodriguez with an expression of continued amazement. "Chief, in all your years in the teams, have you ever seen anything like that?" Rodriguez shook his head. "Never, Williams, and I suspect we never will again. What we witnessed this morning was something special, not just the tactical performance, but the way Captain Santos handled herself throughout the entire situation. Do you think Commander Morrison will recover from this?" Rodriguez considered the question carefully. "That depends entirely on what he learns from this experience and how he chooses to move forward. Captain Santos gave him an opportunity to grow as a leader. Whether he takes advantage of that opportunity remains to be seen." As the morning gave way to afternoon, Rodriguez found himself returning again and again to the image of Santos emerging from the CQC facility with the calm satisfaction of someone who had just completed a routine training exercise. The contrast between her humble appearance and her extraordinary capabilities would remain with him for the rest of his career. The woman in the gray t-shirt had taught them all a lesson about the danger of assumptions and the power of quiet competence. But more importantly, she had demonstrated that true warriors were defined not by their ability to dominate others, but by their willingness to use their strength in service of something greater than themselves. As Rodriguez resumed his duties as range safety chief, he couldn't help but smile at the thought of the training program Santos would develop. The SEALs at Coronado were about to receive an education from one of the finest operators in the history of special operations. And perhaps most importantly, they would learn those lessons from someone who understood that the greatest victories were won not through force, but through character. The morning sun had given way to the heat of midday, but the lessons learned in those first few hours would last a lifetime. Rodriguez knew that every person present had been changed by what they had witnessed, and he suspected that the changes would make them all better warriors and better leaders. As he watched the range activities resume their normal rhythm, Rodriguez allowed himself one final reflection on the morning's events. Sometimes the most important lessons came from the most unexpected sources. Today, those lessons had come from a quiet woman in a gray t-shirt who had reminded them all what it truly meant to be a professional warrior. The story was far from over, but Rodriguez was confident that whatever came next would be worthy of the extraordinary beginning they had all witnessed. Captain Santos had arrived at Coronado as a mystery, but she was leaving as a legend, and everyone who had been present for her arrival would carry that legend forward into their own futures, making them all better for having witnessed true greatness in action. The afternoon sun blazed overhead as Rodriguez made his way back to the command building, where Captain Hayes had requested all senior personnel for an emergency briefing. The morning's revelations about Captain Santos had set in motion a series of events that would reshape the entire training program at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Inside the briefing room, Rodriguez found himself seated alongside Lieutenant Mills, Chief Petty Officer Jackson, and several other senior enlisted personnel. Morrison sat at the far end of the table, his face still bearing the weight of his morning encounter. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation as they waited for Captain Hayes to begin. When Hayes entered the room, followed closely by Captain Santos, the entire assembly rose to attention. Santos had changed from her civilian clothes into a crisp navy uniform that bore the insignia of her former rank and the ribbons that told the story of 2 decades of distinguished service. The transformation was remarkable. The quiet woman in the gray t-shirt had been replaced by an unmistakably commanding officer whose presence filled the room. "Be seated," Hayes commanded, taking his position at the head of the table. "Gentlemen, this afternoon's briefing will cover significant changes to our training protocols and the introduction of new advanced combat curricula under the supervision of Captain Santos." Rodriguez felt a surge of excitement mixed with apprehension. Having a DevGru team leader redesign their training programs was an unprecedented opportunity, but it also meant that everything they thought they knew about advanced combat preparation was about to be challenged and improved. "Captain Santos," Hayes continued, "has agreed to conduct a comprehensive evaluation of our current training methods and develop enhanced programs that incorporate lessons learned from recent special operations deployments. This evaluation will begin immediately and will involve direct observation of all training activities." Santos stood, her bearing commanding immediate attention from everyone present. "Thank you, Captain Hayes. Over the next several weeks, I will be working closely with each of you to assess current capabilities and identify areas for improvement. This process will require your complete cooperation and honest feedback about existing procedures." Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to command, but Rodriguez also detected an undertone of genuine respect for the personnel she would be working with. This was not going to be a top-down imposition of new methods, but rather a collaborative effort to enhance existing strengths. "I want to be clear about my expectations," Santos continued. "We will be pushing boundaries, challenging assumptions, and exploring new approaches to combat preparation. Some of you may find these methods uncomfortable or unfamiliar. That discomfort is part of the learning process." Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat, understanding that he would likely be subjected to particularly intense scrutiny given the morning's events. Santos seemed to sense his discomfort and addressed him directly. "Commander Morrison, I want you to know that your participation in this process is not only welcome but essential. Your experience and leadership will be valuable assets as we develop new training protocols. This morning's interaction demonstrated your commitment to protecting your personnel and facility. That commitment, properly channeled, is exactly what we need." The gracious acknowledgement drew surprised looks from several attendees. Santos was offering Morrison a path to redemption rather than punishment, demonstrating the kind of leadership that built teams rather than destroying them. Hayes resumed control of the briefing. "The first phase of this evaluation will focus on individual skill assessment. Captain Santos will be conducting personal interviews and practical evaluations with all senior personnel over the next week. These evaluations will be confidential and will focus on identifying strengths and development opportunities." Rodriguez felt his pulse quicken at the prospect of being evaluated by one of the most elite operators in U.S. military history. The opportunity to receive feedback from someone of Santos's caliber was both exciting and intimidating. "Additionally," Hayes continued, "we will be implementing new safety protocols for all training activities. This morning's events highlighted some gaps in our procedures for handling unusual situations. Captain Santos will be working with our safety officers to develop enhanced protocols that maintain security while ensuring appropriate treatment of all personnel." The indirect reference to Morrison's handling of Santos's arrival sent a clear message about command's view of the morning's events. Changes were coming, and they would be comprehensive. Santos stepped forward again. "I want to address something that I know is on everyone's mind. This morning's demonstration was not intended to embarrass anyone or to establish dominance. It was simply a response to a challenge that allowed me to establish my credentials in a way that everyone could understand and respect." She paused, making eye contact with Morrison before continuing. "In special operations, we learn that every situation is a learning opportunity. This morning taught us all valuable lessons about assumptions, protocols, and the importance of maintaining professionalism under pressure. Moving forward, we will build on those lessons to create better systems and stronger teams." The room was silent as everyone absorbed the implications of her words. Santos was reframing the morning's confrontation as a valuable training exercise rather than a personal conflict, demonstrating the kind of leadership that turned potential disasters into growth opportunities. Hayes concluded the briefing with specific assignments and timelines. Individual evaluations would begin the following Monday, with each session lasting approximately 2 hours. Written assessments would be completed by the end of the following week, and new training protocols would be implemented within 30 days. As the meeting dispersed, Rodriguez found himself walking alongside Mills toward the exit. "Lieutenant," he said quietly, "what do you think about all this?" Mills considered the question carefully. "I think we're about to receive an education from one of the finest operators in the history of special warfare. That's either going to be the best thing that ever happened to our careers, or it's going to be the most humbling experience we've ever endured." "Probably both," Rodriguez replied with a rueful smile. Their conversation was interrupted by Santos herself, who approached them with a friendly but professional demeanor. "Chief Rodriguez, Lieutenant Mills, could I speak with you for a moment?" Both men nodded immediately, curious about what the legendary operator might want to discuss with them specifically. "I wanted to thank you both for your professionalism this morning," Santos began. "Your attempts to de-escalate the situation and ensure proper protocols were noted and appreciated. That kind of leadership under pressure is exactly what we need in our advanced training programs." Rodriguez felt a surge of pride at the acknowledgement. "Ma'am, we were just doing our jobs." "Exactly," Santos replied with a smile. "You were doing your jobs properly, even when the situation became complicated. That's the mark of true professionals. I'm looking forward to working with both of you in the coming weeks." As Santos walked away, Mills turned to Rodriguez with an expression of amazement. "Did one of the most elite operators in the U.S. military just thank us for doing our jobs?" "I think she did," Rodriguez replied, still processing the unexpected recognition. "And I think we're about to learn what real leadership looks like." The following Monday arrived with an atmosphere of nervous anticipation throughout the base. Santos had established her temporary office in the advanced training facility, and her first individual evaluation was scheduled with Chief Rodriguez at 0800 hours. Rodriguez arrived 10 minutes early, as was his custom, and found Santos reviewing files in an office that had been transformed from a simple storage room into a professional workspace. She had brought minimal personal items, but those few possessions spoke volumes about her background: a shadow box containing medals and ribbons, a photograph of a SEAL team in an undisclosed location, and a bookshelf containing advanced tactical manuals and leadership texts. "Good morning, Chief," Santos said, looking up from her paperwork. "Please, have a seat. Coffee?" The casual offer of coffee caught Rodriguez off guard. He had expected a formal, intimidating evaluation process, not a friendly conversation over beverages. "Yes, ma'am, thank you." As Santos poured coffee from a thermos, Rodriguez noticed that her movements retained the same controlled precision he had observed during the CQC demonstration. Every action was economical and purposeful, reflecting decades of training and operational experience. "Before we begin," Santos said, settling into her chair, "I want you to understand that this evaluation is not about finding faults or weaknesses. It's about identifying your strengths and determining how we can build upon them to enhance our overall training capabilities." Rodriguez nodded, though he remained somewhat tense about the process. Being evaluated by someone of Santos's caliber was inherently intimidating, regardless of her reassuring words. "Tell me about your background," Santos continued. "How did you end up in your current position? And what aspects of your work do you find most rewarding?" The question was broader than Rodriguez had expected, and he found himself relaxing slightly as he described his 20-year journey through various assignments that had led him to his current role as Range Safety Chief. Santos listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated genuine interest in his experiences and perspectives. "You mentioned that you spent 3 years with 2nd Battalion," Santos observed. "That deployment cycle would have included some significant operational activity. How did those experiences shape your approach to training and safety protocols?" Rodriguez felt his comfort level increasing as he realized that Santos was not trying to catch him in mistakes or expose deficiencies. Instead, she was genuinely interested in understanding how his experiences had informed his professional development. "Ma'am, those deployments taught me that training has to be as realistic as possible without being unnecessarily dangerous. The gap between training and reality can get people killed, but so can training that doesn't account for safety considerations." Santos nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need to incorporate into our new programs. The challenge is finding the balance between realism and safety, between pushing boundaries and maintaining responsible risk management." The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, covering topics ranging from specific training techniques to broader questions of leadership philosophy. Rodriguez found himself sharing insights and experiences that he had never discussed in formal settings, drawn out by Santos's skillful questioning and genuine interest. "Chief," Santos said as the evaluation concluded, "I want you to know that this conversation has been extremely valuable. Your combination of operational experience and training expertise makes you an ideal candidate for expanded responsibilities in our new programs." Rodriguez felt a surge of professional satisfaction. "Ma'am, I appreciate your confidence. I'm excited about the possibility of contributing to enhanced training methods." "Good," Santos replied, making notes in her file. "I'll be discussing expanded roles for several personnel with Captain Hayes. Your name will definitely be on that list." As Rodriguez left the office, he realized that his apprehension about the evaluation had been completely unfounded. Santos had conducted the session as a professional conversation between equals, focused on identifying opportunities for growth and contribution rather than highlighting deficiencies or problems. Word of Rodriguez's positive evaluation spread quickly through the senior enlisted ranks, and subsequent evaluations were approached with curiosity rather than dread. Santos conducted each session with the same professional respect and genuine interest that had marked her conversation with Rodriguez. Morrison's evaluation, scheduled for Wednesday afternoon, was anticipated with particular interest, given the circumstances of his first encounter with Santos. When he emerged from the office after nearly 3 hours, his expression was thoughtful rather than defeated. "How did it go?" Mills asked quietly as Morrison passed through the administrative area. Morrison paused, considering his response carefully. "It was educational. Captain Santos is remarkably skilled at helping people examine their own assumptions and motivations. I learned things about myself that I hadn't realized before." The cryptic response left Mills curious about the specifics, but Morrison's improved demeanor suggested that the evaluation had been constructive rather than punitive. Whatever Santos had discussed with him had apparently provided perspective rather than condemnation. By the end of the week, Santos had completed individual evaluations with 12 senior personnel, ranging from experienced chiefs to junior officers. The consistent feedback was that she had conducted professional, respectful conversations that focused on potential rather than problems. Friday afternoon brought the first group session, where Santos gathered the evaluated personnel to discuss initial findings and outline the direction of the new training programs. The briefing room was filled with an atmosphere of anticipation as the senior staff waited to learn how their individual evaluations would translate into program changes. "Gentlemen," Santos began, "this week's evaluations have confirmed my initial assessment that you have an exceptionally capable and experienced team here at Coronado. The challenge is not replacing existing capabilities, but rather enhancing and expanding them." The positive opening set a tone of collaboration rather than criticism, immediately putting the assembled personnel at ease. "Based on our conversations, I've identified several areas where we can implement improvements that will benefit everyone involved. First, we're going to enhance our scenario-based training to incorporate more complex decision-making challenges. Real operations rarely present simple solutions, and our training should reflect that complexity." Rodriguez found himself nodding in agreement. His own operational experience had taught him that combat situations were usually characterized by incomplete information, time pressure, and competing priorities. "Second," Santos continued, "we are going to implement more comprehensive after-action reviews that focus not just on technical performance, but on decision-making processes and adaptive thinking. Understanding why someone made a particular choice is often more valuable than simply measuring whether that choice produced the desired outcome." The emphasis on learning from decisions, rather than just results, resonated with Morrison, who had spent the week reflecting on his own decision-making process during Santos's arrival. Understanding the reasoning behind choices would help prevent similar errors in judgment. Third, we're going to introduce cross-training opportunities that allow personnel to develop skills outside their primary specialties. The modern operational environment requires adaptability, and our training should reflect that requirement. Mills felt excitement building as he considered the possibilities. Cross-training with personnel from different specialties would provide valuable perspective and enhance overall team capabilities. Finally, Santos concluded, We're going to implement mentorship programs that pair experienced personnel with developing operators. Institutional knowledge is one of our most valuable assets, and we need to ensure it's effectively transferred to the next generation. The comprehensive approach impressed everyone present. Santos was not proposing wholesale changes to existing systems, but rather thoughtful enhancements that would build upon established strengths. I want to emphasize that these changes will be implemented gradually and with your input at every stage, Santos continued. You know your people and your capabilities better than I do. My role is to provide perspective and experience that can help you achieve your goals more effectively. Hayes stepped forward to address the group. Implementation of these new protocols will begin next Monday. Captain Santos will be working directly with each department to ensure smooth transitions and appropriate training for all personnel involved. As the briefing concluded, Rodriguez found himself approaching Santos with a question that had been building throughout the week. "Ma'am, can I ask you something about leadership?" Santos nodded encouragingly. "Of course, Chief. What's on your mind?" "This morning, when Commander Morrison first challenged you, you had the opportunity to immediately establish your authority and put him in his place. Instead, you chose to go along with his tests and prove yourself through demonstration. Why did you make that choice?" Santos considered the question thoughtfully before responding. "Chief, true authority doesn't need to be declared or defended. It demonstrates itself through actions and character. If I had simply pulled rank or demanded immediate recognition, it would have established hierarchy but not respect. By allowing the situation to develop naturally, I was able to establish both." The explanation provided insight into the sophisticated leadership thinking that had guided Santos's responses throughout the morning's confrontation. She had turned a potentially destructive situation into a powerful learning opportunity for everyone involved. "More importantly," Santos continued, "I wanted to demonstrate to everyone present that competence and character matter more than titles or positions. In special operations, we succeed because we trust each other's capabilities, not because we follow orders blindly." Rodriguez nodded, understanding how the morning's events had served multiple purposes beyond simply establishing Santos's credentials. She had provided a masterclass in leadership under pressure, while simultaneously creating opportunities for everyone present to learn and grow. The weekend passed quietly, with personnel throughout the base discussing the upcoming changes and speculating about their implementation. Monday morning brought the beginning of the new training protocols, starting with enhanced scenario-based exercises that immediately demonstrated the difference between Santos's approach and traditional methods. The first scenario involved a complex hostage rescue situation with multiple variables and competing priorities. Instead of providing a predetermined solution, Santos allowed the teams to develop their own approaches and then led detailed discussions about the reasoning behind each decision. "Explain to me why you chose to breach through the north entrance," Santos said to the team leader after the exercise concluded. "Ma'am, it provided the most direct route to the target area and minimized exposure time," the young SEAL replied. "Good reasoning," Santos acknowledged. "Now tell me what other factors you considered and what alternatives you rejected." The questioning continued for several minutes, exploring not just the decision that was made, but the entire thought process that led to that decision. Other team members were encouraged to contribute their perspectives and suggest alternative approaches. Rodriguez, observing from the sidelines, realized that this method of after-action review was far more comprehensive than traditional approaches. Instead of simply identifying what worked and what didn't, Santos was helping the teams understand how to think through complex problems more effectively. The second scenario introduced additional complications midway through execution, forcing teams to adapt their plans in real time. These adaptive challenges reflected the reality of modern operations, where initial plans rarely survived contact with actual conditions. "How did you know to modify your approach when the scenario changed?" Santos asked another team leader. "Ma'am, we had discussed contingency plans during our initial briefing, so when conditions changed, we already had alternative approaches ready to implement." "Excellent," Santos replied. "But what if you hadn't anticipated this particular change? How would you have adapted?" The questions pushed the teams to think beyond predetermined responses and develop genuine adaptive thinking capabilities. Rodriguez could see the value immediately. These SEALs were learning to be problem solvers rather than just tactical executors. Morrison, participating in the exercises as both observer and student, found himself gaining new appreciation for the depth of Santos's expertise. Her questions revealed layers of tactical thinking that he had never fully considered, despite his years of experience. During a break between scenarios, Morrison approached Santos with a request that surprised everyone present. "Ma'am, could you demonstrate the decision-making process you would use for this type of scenario?" The request represented a complete reversal from Morrison's initial skepticism. He was now actively seeking to learn from someone he had initially challenged and dismissed. Santos agreed, walking through a complex scenario while verbalizing her thought process at each decision point. Her analysis revealed the kind of multi-layered thinking that separated elite operators from simply competent ones. "I'm considering 3 primary factors simultaneously," Santos explained. "Immediate tactical requirements, potential secondary complications, and long-term mission objectives. Each decision must optimize for all 3 factors, rather than just solving the immediate problem." The demonstration provided insights that would have taken years of experience to develop independently. Morrison found himself taking notes, recognizing that he was receiving a masterclass in tactical thinking from one of the finest military minds of his generation. By the end of the first week under the new protocols, the improvements were obvious to everyone involved. Training exercises were more realistic, more challenging, and more educational. Personnel were developing enhanced problem-solving capabilities alongside their technical skills. The second week brought the introduction of cross-training programs, with specialists from different areas working together on complex scenarios that required multiple skill sets. Medical personnel worked alongside communications specialists and weapons experts to solve problems that demanded diverse expertise. Rodriguez found himself working with intelligence analysts and logistics coordinators on scenarios that highlighted the interconnected nature of modern operations. The experience broadened his perspective significantly and enhanced his appreciation for the complexity of successful mission planning. "This is incredible," Williams commented during one of the cross-training exercises. "I never realized how much the intel guys contribute to our success in the field." The sentiment was echoed throughout the participating groups as personnel gained new appreciation for the roles and capabilities of their colleagues in different specialties. The cross-training was building not just enhanced capabilities, but also stronger teams. Morrison's participation in the cross-training exercises provided him with opportunities to demonstrate leadership in new contexts. Santos carefully observed his interactions with personnel from different backgrounds, noting his growing ability to adapt his leadership style to different situations and personalities. "Commander," Santos said during one of their regular feedback sessions, "I've noticed significant improvement in your ability to build consensus among diverse team members. How has your approach changed?" Morrison considered the question carefully. "Ma'am, I've learned that different people respond to different types of leadership. What motivates a seasoned chief might not work with a young intelligence analyst. Effective leadership requires adapting to the needs and capabilities of the people you're working with." The insight demonstrated genuine growth in Morrison's understanding of leadership principles. Santos made notes in her evaluation file, documenting the positive changes she had observed in his performance and attitude. The third week brought the introduction of mentorship programs, pairing experienced personnel with developing operators in formal relationships designed to transfer institutional knowledge and provide guidance for career development. Rodriguez was paired with a young petty officer who showed exceptional promise but lacked the experience to fully understand the broader context of his work. The mentorship relationship provided Rodriguez with opportunities to share lessons learned over 2 decades while helping the younger SEAL develop more sophisticated understanding of his role. "Chief," his mentee asked during one of their sessions, "how do you know when to push safety limits during training and when to be more conservative?" The question provided Rodriguez with an opportunity to share insights that had taken years to develop. "It's about understanding the difference between acceptable risk and unnecessary danger," he explained. "Every training exercise involves some risk, but that risk should serve a specific learning purpose. If the risk doesn't contribute to learning objectives, it's probably unnecessary." The mentorship programs were creating systematic methods for transferring the kind of hard-earned wisdom that typically took years to acquire through experience alone. Younger personnel were developing enhanced understanding more quickly, while experienced personnel were finding renewed purpose in their roles as teachers and guides. Morrison's role as a mentor to junior officers provided him with opportunities to demonstrate the leadership growth he had achieved through his work with Santos. His mentees reported that he was supportive, insightful, and genuinely invested in their professional development. Commander Morrison has really helped me understand the broader implications of tactical decisions, one young ensign reported during a feedback session with Santos. He's taught me to think beyond the immediate mission requirements and consider how our actions affect long-term objectives. The positive feedback confirmed Santos's assessment that Morrison had learned valuable lessons from his initial mistakes and was applying those lessons to become a more effective leader. By the end of the third week, the transformation of the training programs was complete, but the benefits were just beginning to become apparent. Personnel throughout the base were demonstrating enhanced capabilities, improved teamwork, and greater confidence in their abilities to handle complex challenges. Captain Hayes called a meeting of senior staff to review the progress and discuss long-term implementation of the new protocols. The conference room was filled with an atmosphere of satisfaction and optimism as the assembled personnel prepared to discuss their experiences. "Gentlemen," Hayes began, "the reports I have received about our new training protocols have been universally positive. Captain Santos, could you share your assessment of our progress?" Santos stood, her bearing reflecting the satisfaction of someone who had successfully completed a challenging mission. "Captain Hayes, I'm pleased to report that the personnel at this facility have exceeded my expectations in every measurable category. The enthusiasm for learning, the willingness to adapt, and the commitment to excellence have been remarkable." Rodriguez felt a surge of pride at the recognition. The past 3 weeks had been challenging but rewarding, pushing everyone involved to grow and improve in ways they had not expected. "The new protocols are now fully integrated into your training curriculum," Santos continued. "Your personnel have demonstrated mastery of the enhanced methods and are ready to implement them independently. My role here is essentially complete." The announcement brought mixed reactions from the assembled group. While they were proud of their successful adaptation to the new methods, many had hoped that Santos would remain as a permanent part of their team. Morrison raised his hand to speak. "Ma'am, on behalf of all the personnel who have worked with you, I want to express our gratitude for the learning opportunities you've provided. Your mentorship has made us all better operators and better leaders." The statement represented a complete transformation from Morrison's initial hostility to genuine respect and appreciation. Santos nodded acknowledgement, recognizing the growth that Morrison's words represented. "Commander Morrison," Santos replied, "your willingness to learn and adapt has been exemplary. You've demonstrated the kind of leadership growth that will serve you and your personnel well throughout your career." Hayes stepped forward to make an announcement that surprised everyone present. "Captain Santos, I've received authorization from Naval Special Warfare Command to offer you a permanent position as Director of Advanced Training Development. The position would involve oversight of training programs across multiple facilities and would allow you to expand the work you've begun here." The offer represented a significant opportunity for Santos to influence special operations training on a much broader scale. Rodriguez found himself hoping she would accept, recognizing the value her expertise could bring to the entire SEAL community. Santos considered the offer carefully before responding. "Captain Hayes, I'm honored by the opportunity, but I must respectfully decline. My commitment is to serve where I can make the greatest impact, and I believe that impact is best achieved through direct work with operators rather than administrative oversight." The decision disappointed Hayes but did not surprise him. Santos had consistently demonstrated that her passion lay in hands-on training and development rather than bureaucratic management. "However," Santos continued, "I would be interested in establishing a consulting relationship that would allow me to return periodically to assess progress and provide updated training methods as they're developed." The alternative proposal offered a compromise that would maintain Santos's involvement while allowing her the flexibility to pursue other opportunities. Hayes accepted immediately, recognizing the value of continued access to Santos's expertise. Rodriguez found himself wondering what Santos would do next, now that her work at Coronado was complete. When he asked her directly, her response reflected the same thoughtful consideration that had marked all her decisions. "Chief, there are other facilities that could benefit from similar training enhancements. My goal is to share these methods as widely as possible within the special operations community. The techniques we've developed here shouldn't be limited to a single base." The answer confirmed Rodriguez's assessment of Santos's character. She was motivated not by personal advancement or recognition, but by a genuine desire to improve the capabilities of all special operations personnel. The final week of Santos's residency at Coronado was devoted to comprehensive documentation of the new training methods and preparation of materials that would allow other facilities to implement similar programs. Rodriguez and several other senior personnel worked with Santos to create detailed manuals and training guides. The key to successful implementation, Santos explained during one of their documentation sessions, is understanding that these methods must be adapted to local conditions and capabilities. What works here might need modification to be effective elsewhere. The flexibility built into the training methods reflected Santos's understanding that one-size-fits-all solutions rarely worked in military training. Effective programs had to account for local resources, personnel capabilities, and mission requirements. Morrison volunteered to help develop assessment criteria that could be used to evaluate the effectiveness of the new methods at other facilities. His involvement in this process demonstrated his complete commitment to the principles Santos had taught and his desire to contribute to their broader implementation. "Commander," Santos said as they worked on the assessment protocols, "your insights into leadership development have been valuable contributions to these materials. Your experiences will help other commanders avoid similar mistakes and achieve better outcomes." The acknowledgement of Morrison's contributions represented the final step in his rehabilitation from the morning's initial confrontation. Santos had not only forgiven his mistakes, but had found ways to turn his experiences into valuable lessons for others. The farewell ceremony, held on Santos's final Friday at Coronado, was attended by virtually every person on the base. Captain Hayes presented her with a commemorative plaque recognizing her contributions to training development, while the enlisted personnel presented her with a shadow box containing mementos from each department she had worked with. "Captain Santos," Hayes said in his farewell address, "your time here has transformed not just our training methods, but our understanding of what it means to be professional warriors. You've taught us that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from lifting them up and helping them achieve their potential." Santos's response was characteristically humble and focused on the achievements of others rather than her own contributions. "The success of these programs belongs to all of you. My role was simply to provide perspective and guidance. The hard work of implementation and mastery was accomplished by your dedication and professionalism." Rodriguez found himself reflecting on the transformation that had taken place over the past month. The woman who had arrived as an apparent intruder had become a respected mentor and teacher whose influence would be felt for years to come. Morrison approached Santos privately after the ceremony concluded. "Ma'am, I want you to know that working with you has been the most valuable professional experience of my career. You've taught me lessons about leadership that I'll carry with me forever." Santos smiled warmly. "Commander, you've demonstrated that the best leaders are those who are willing to learn from their mistakes and grow stronger. Your example will inspire others to embrace similar growth opportunities." As Santos prepared to depart Coronado, Rodriguez couldn't help but think about the morning 4 weeks earlier when she had first walked through the base gates. The quiet woman in the gray t-shirt had revealed herself to be one of the most accomplished warriors in American military history, but more importantly, she had demonstrated what it meant to be a true leader. The lessons learned during Santos's residency would continue to influence training and operations at Coronado for years to come. Every SEAL who had worked with her would carry forward enhanced capabilities and deeper understanding of professional excellence. 6 months later, Rodriguez received a letter from Santos describing her work at other facilities and the successful implementation of enhanced training methods throughout the special operations community. The programs they had developed together at Coronado had become models for similar improvements across multiple bases. Morrison, meanwhile, had been selected for promotion and assignment to a training command, where he could apply the leadership lessons he had learned. His transformation from the confrontational officer who had challenged Santos to a respected mentor and teacher demonstrated the power of learning from mistakes and embracing growth opportunities. The new training protocols continued to evolve and improve, with regular updates based on feedback from operational deployments and lessons learned from real-world applications. The foundation that Santos had established proved to be robust and adaptable, continuing to enhance SEAL capabilities long after her departure. 1 year after Santos's visit, Coronado was selected as the model facility for a Navy-wide expansion of enhanced training methods. The recognition confirmed that the work Santos had initiated had achieved lasting impact and would benefit future generations of special operations personnel. Rodriguez, now serving as senior enlisted advisor for advanced training development, often reflected on the lessons learned during that transformative month. The morning confrontation that had seemed like such a disaster had ultimately become the catalyst for improvements that enhanced the capabilities of thousands of operators. The challenge coin that Santos had displayed during her identity reveal had been returned to her, but its impact continued to resonate throughout the SEAL community. The coin represented not just individual achievement, but the commitment to excellence that defined the best of special operations personnel. Morrison's career had recovered and flourished following his experience with Santos. His ability to learn from mistakes and adapt his leadership style had become legendary within the community, inspiring other officers to embrace similar growth opportunities rather than defending their errors. The story of Santos's arrival at Coronado became part of base folklore, told and retold to new personnel as an example of the importance of maintaining professionalism under pressure and the danger of making assumptions about others based on appearances. But the most important legacy of Santos's visit was not the dramatic story of her initial confrontation with Morrison, but rather the lasting improvements to training methods and leadership development that continued to enhance SEAL capabilities years later. The ripple effects of that transformative month extended far beyond the walls of Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, touching the lives and careers of countless operators who would never know the name of the woman who had quietly revolutionized their preparation for combat. In the months following Santos's departure, the enhanced training protocols she had developed became the gold standard for special operations preparation throughout the Navy. The scenario-based exercises that emphasized adaptive thinking over rote memorization produced operators who could think creatively under pressure, solving problems that had no predetermined solutions. The comprehensive after-action reviews that explored decision-making processes rather than simply measuring outcomes created a culture of continuous learning that transformed how teams approached both training and real-world missions. Rodriguez often found himself marveling at the sophistication of the methods Santos had introduced. What had initially seemed like simple modifications to existing procedures had revealed themselves to be fundamental improvements in how military personnel learned and developed. The cross-training programs that brought together specialists from different fields had created a new generation of operators who understood the interconnected nature of modern warfare and could adapt to changing mission requirements with unprecedented flexibility. The mentorship programs had perhaps shown the most dramatic results. The systematic transfer of institutional knowledge from experienced personnel to developing operators had accelerated the learning curve for new SEALs while providing renewed purpose and satisfaction for senior personnel. Chiefs and petty officers who had previously focused solely on their own specialties found themselves becoming teachers and guides, sharing hard-earned wisdom that might otherwise have been lost when they retired or transferred to other assignments. Morrison's transformation had become legendary within the SEAL community, not because of his initial mistake, but because of his response to that mistake. His willingness to acknowledge error, learn from feedback, and fundamentally change his approach to leadership had inspired other officers to examine their own assumptions and biases. The quarterly leadership workshops he now conducted at bases throughout the Pacific Fleet drew waiting lists of officers eager to learn from someone who had experienced both failure and redemption in such a public fashion. The documentation Santos had created during her final weeks at Coronado had become required reading at the Naval War College and other military education institutions. Her insights into adaptive leadership, decision-making under pressure, and the cultivation of organizational learning had influenced military doctrine far beyond the special operations community. Army Rangers, Marine Force reconnaissance units, and Air Force special operations personnel had all implemented variations of the training methods she had pioneered. Williams, the young SEAL who had first noticed the unusual precision of Santos's movements, had been selected for advanced leadership training based partly on his demonstrated ability to observe and analyze tactical situations. His detailed reports on the implementation of Santos's methods had been distributed throughout Naval Special Warfare Command as examples of how young operators could contribute to organizational improvement through careful observation and thoughtful analysis. The challenge coin that Santos had displayed during her identity reveal had become more than just a symbol of individual achievement. It had come to represent the principle that true authority was earned through competence and character, rather than simply conferred through rank or position. Chief Rodriguez kept a photograph of that coin on his desk, as a reminder that assumptions about others based on appearance or initial impressions were often dangerously incorrect. The physical changes to the base facilities had been less dramatic but equally important. The CQC training house where Santos had delivered her legendary performance had been upgraded with new technology that allowed for more sophisticated scenarios and better assessment of operator performance. The weapons maintenance bay had been expanded to accommodate the cross-training programs that brought together personnel from different specialties. The briefing rooms had been equipped with advanced visualization systems that supported the enhanced after-action review processes. But the most significant changes had been in the culture and atmosphere of the base itself. The competitive atmosphere that had previously emphasized individual achievement over team success had been replaced by a collaborative environment where sharing knowledge and supporting colleagues were recognized as essential components of mission success. Young operators no longer felt pressure to prove themselves through displays of bravado or aggression, but instead focused on developing the quiet competence that Santos had demonstrated. The quarterly visits Santos made to assess progress and provide updated training methods had become major events that drew observers from throughout the special operations community. Her sessions combined technical instruction with broader discussions of leadership philosophy and professional development. These visits maintained the momentum of improvement while ensuring that the enhanced methods continued to evolve based on lessons learned from operational deployments. Rodriguez had been promoted to Master Chief and appointed as the senior enlisted advisor for the entire Naval Special Warfare Training Command, a position that allowed him to oversee the implementation of Santos's methods at facilities throughout the Navy. His quarterly reports documented measurable improvements in operator performance, reduced training accidents, and enhanced mission success rates that validated the effectiveness of the new approaches. The academic institutions that studied military training and leadership had taken notice of the Coronado transformation. Researchers from the Naval Postgraduate School, the Air Force Academy, and civilian universities had conducted extensive studies of the enhanced training methods, producing papers and dissertations that helped spread the principles to other military and civilian organizations. The business community had shown particular interest in Santos's approaches to adaptive leadership and decision-making under pressure. Morrison's promotion to full commander and assignment to Naval Special Warfare Command headquarters had provided him with opportunities to champion the broader implementation of enhanced training methods throughout the special operations community. His presentations to senior leadership emphasized the measurable benefits of investing in comprehensive training development rather than simply increasing the quantity of exercises or the complexity of equipment. The international implications of the training improvements had been equally significant. Allied Special Operations Forces had requested access to the enhanced methods, recognizing their potential to improve multinational cooperation and mission effectiveness. Exchange programs had been established with British SAS, Canadian JTF-2, and Australian SASR units, spreading Santos's influence throughout the global special operations community. The technology industry had also taken notice of the decision-making frameworks and adaptive thinking methods that Santos had developed. Several major corporations had hired military consultants to implement modified versions of the training approaches in their own leadership development programs. The principles of scenario-based learning, comprehensive after-action analysis, and systematic knowledge transfer had proven valuable in civilian contexts as well as military ones. Rodriguez often reflected on how a single morning's confrontation had catalyzed such widespread change. The woman who had walked through the base gates in a simple gray t-shirt had possessed not only exceptional tactical skills, but also the wisdom to turn a potentially destructive situation into a powerful teaching opportunity. Her patience with Morrison's initial hostility and her decision to accept his challenges, rather than simply asserting her authority, had created conditions for learning that might never have existed otherwise. The stories told about that morning had evolved over time, but they consistently emphasized the same themes that Santos herself had highlighted. Assumptions based on appearance or background were dangerous. True competence spoke for itself through actions rather than claims. The most effective leaders were those who lifted others up rather than putting them down. These lessons had become embedded in the culture of the special operations community in ways that formal instruction never could have achieved. The annual Santos Leadership Award, established by Naval Special Warfare Command to recognize outstanding examples of adaptive leadership and professional development, had become one of the most prestigious honors in the special operations community. Recipients were selected not for single acts of heroism, but for sustained contributions to the development of others and the improvement of organizational capabilities. The award criteria specifically emphasized the principles that Santos had demonstrated: humility in the face of challenge, grace under pressure, and commitment to the growth of others. The quiet woman in the gray t-shirt had reminded everyone that true warriors were defined not by their ability to dominate others, but by their commitment to serving something greater than themselves. This principle had become foundational to the identity of the modern special operations community, influencing everything from selection criteria for new operators to promotion standards for senior leaders. The emphasis on service before self had created a more collaborative and effective fighting force that attracted the highest quality personnel and retained their commitment throughout their careers. Her legacy lived on in every operator who benefited from the enhanced training methods and in every leader who applied the lessons she had taught about character, competence, and professional excellence. The thousands of SEALs who had never met Santos personally still carried forward the benefits of her innovations, approaching their missions with enhanced capabilities and deeper understanding of their responsibilities as professional warriors. The training methods she had developed had been tested in combat deployments throughout the Middle East, Africa, and the Pacific, consistently producing superior results compared to traditionally trained units. Mission success rates had improved measurably, while casualty rates had decreased significantly. The adaptive thinking skills and enhanced teamwork capabilities that her methods fostered had proven invaluable in the complex, rapidly changing operational environments that characterized modern warfare. Rodriguez concluded his reflection with a simple truth that Santos had demonstrated through her actions rather than her words. The greatest victories were not won through force or intimidation, but through the patient work of building better systems, developing stronger teams, and inspiring others to achieve their highest potential. This understanding had transformed not only how the special operations community approached training and development, but how they understood their role in the broader defense of democratic values and human freedom. The principle that lasting change came through education and inspiration, rather than coercion, had applications far beyond military training. The civilian organizations that had studied and adapted Santos's methods had found them equally effective in developing leaders who could navigate complex challenges while maintaining ethical standards and building collaborative relationships. The morning sun that had witnessed Santos's arrival at Coronado continued to rise each day over a base that had been permanently changed by her brief but transformative presence. The physical structures remained largely the same, but the activities that took place within them reflected fundamentally different approaches to learning, leadership, and professional development. The operators who trained there carried forward enhanced capabilities that would serve them throughout their careers and influence their own future leadership of the next generation. And in that continuing sunrise, the promise of ongoing growth and improvement remained as bright as the California sky under which it all began. The culture of continuous learning and mutual support that Santos had fostered ensured that the improvements she had initiated would continue to evolve and expand, adapting to new challenges while maintaining the core principles of character, competence, and commitment to service. The research and development programs that had grown out of her initial work continued to produce innovations in training methods, leadership development, and organizational learning. The academic partnerships that had been established ensured that these innovations were rigorously tested and documented, creating a foundation for further improvements that would benefit future generations of warriors and leaders. The story that had started with assumptions and confrontation had concluded with understanding and growth, proving that even the most challenging situations could become opportunities for learning and improvement when approached with the right combination of character, competence, and commitment to excellence. This lesson had been internalized by thousands of military and civilian leaders who had studied the Coronado transformation, creating a multiplier effect that extended Santos's influence far beyond what she could have achieved through direct personal contact alone. The documentation of that morning's events had become a case study in crisis management, leadership under pressure, and the transformation of conflict into opportunity. Business schools, military academies, and leadership development programs throughout the world use the story to illustrate principles of adaptive leadership, emotional intelligence, and organizational change management. Standards first, mission always, people matter most. These principles, demonstrated through Santos's example and reinforced through the enhanced training methods she had developed, continued to guide the warriors of Coronado as they prepared for whatever challenges the future might bring. The integration of these principles into daily operations had created an organizational culture that attracted the finest personnel, developed their capabilities to the fullest extent possible, and retained their commitment throughout their service careers. The legend of Captain Maria Santos, callsign Ghost 6, lived on not in the dramatic story of her arrival, but in the quiet daily work of excellence that she had inspired in others. Every perfectly executed training exercise, every thoughtful after-action review, every moment of mentorship between experienced and developing operators carried forward her influence. The operators who had never heard her name still benefited from the enhanced methods she had created, approaching their duties with capabilities and understanding that had been shaped by her innovations. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. The transformation of a single morning's confrontation into a lasting legacy of improvement and growth demonstrated the power of character, wisdom, and commitment to service. The quiet woman in the gray t-shirt had achieved something that no amount of force or intimidation could have accomplished. She had changed hearts, minds, and capabilities in ways that would continue to benefit others for generations to come. In the end, that was the measure of true leadership and the definition of lasting victory.
The stories end here, but the journey continues. Many new episodes are waiting for you. And if you enjoy, please take a moment to like, subscribe to our EV Story channel, and turn on the bell. See you in the next story.